do a little count up here, and they counted down the top 50 bassists of all time at Rolling Stone magazine.
Oh, they did.
Who would you guess is number one? They actually
Jocko.
He was like 8 or 9 because it's all genres. James Jamerson.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good pick. At least they didn't go with anything like obvious, you know.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Where was Marcus Miller?
Not in there. Victor Wooten wasn't in there. Thundercat was number 50.
Okay, I'm sorry. If Marcus Miller's not in there, then that list doesn't count. I'm sorry.
I know.
Doesn't count. Doesn't
Good
count.
evening, everybody. Welcome here with Mr. Matt Waldman. Maybe we may be joined by Dr. Gene. If you haven't read his piece yet, Coronavirus in the NFL, check that out. Since we missed last week, I was embroiled in a move. And hello, everyone in the chat room. Good evening. I want to go back a week, Matt, because I feel like you always are coming from a place of inspiration when you're writing. The 4 horsemen of the 2020 fantasy apocalypse. I mean, is this just one of those things where if we all feel the vibrations and this was just a way to release them, to exorcise the demons, as we used to say in the opening?
Well, you know, I mean, if you got those religious folks who think the revelation is coming soon, I just figured it would be kind of fun to like think of Antonio Brown, Josh Gordon, Marshawn Lynch, and I'm trying to remember who my 4th person was as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. You know, so most likely, Colin Kaepernick.
Kaepernick. Yeah.
There you go. So just figured that in that sense, you know, probably none of those guys are probably going to be factors at all, but I like to approach drafts from the back end to the front end as in when it comes to researching everything for the season. So if you notice, a lot of the stuff that I do, oh my goodness, talk about
Speaking
the 5th
horseman
horseman,
apocalypse.
It's Jene Bramel without a beard,
looking 20 years younger.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I like to approach the season when it comes to, you know, preparing. I like to do a lot of my articles about the back end of the draft first, because I think it's important to think about where you think the extreme values could come from. Who are players that you think would be on your waiver wire list most likely early on in the season? And that helps formulate my perspective about the first, you know, 2/3 of the draft, I would say. First 2/3 to 3/4 of the draft in terms of how I want to design a build. And so guys, you know, those 4 guys that I looked at, that they're players that you kind of have to consider, at least in terms of how serious are any of them for you know, for your fantasy prospects. And from what it looks like, most likely Antonio Brown will be a serious consideration and could be on a really good team, the Seattle Seahawks, to have that opportunity.
Do you believe all of the insistence that Tampa's not interested? Bruce Arians doesn't want him. Do you think we can close the door on that?
I don't think we can close the door completely, but I just think they know what they are. I mean, to you know, and that kind of goes into a guy I wrote about this past week, which is O.J. Howard, because they said they're going 12 base personnel, which helps their run game, helps their pass protection, and it makes total sense to me because these people who were talking about Scotty Miller, he's a good young player in terms of someone who has some promise, but he's going to be like the 5th or 6th option on this team in the pecking order, especially when you have O.J. Howard and Rob Gronkowski, who can both win as perimeter players, which allows you to put Godwin or Mike Evans in the slot. Why wouldn't you run that? Like 12 personnel is very hard to get the personnel to use on a regular basis. So they have the people to do it. It's very problematic for opposing defenses. So
it will be. And I like the O.J. Howard call, if only because Rob Gronkowski, like smoke could just come out of the hood like by week 3 or week 4, even though it was exciting to find out that he was going to be back. We are back, and Dr. Gene is back. And again, I'd mentioned at the top of the show to check out the doc's Coronavirus in the NFL piece. And Gene, with your conscientious responsibility for community ethos, I would think you'd be aging, but it's in reverse. Now, we got Dr. Gene's younger brothers, Dr. Gene with a G. Gene, welcome. I'm going to start out with this because it was a Cam Newton week. So just based on what you know about his previous injuries, is it reasonable to think that the NFL let him sign for $550,000 guaranteed in New England because of the injuries, or just based on your experience watching personnel moves, watching injuries, watching players recover or not recover? Is there something more to the story than that?
Maybe there's a little bit more to the story. I think probably a lot of it had to do with injuries, though. Dealing with ankle issues, shoulder problems, and now more recently the foot issue. And teams, when they're looking to make big investments, are careful in some respects, not always. And I think, there was some hinting that I had read, and I'll maybe buy into it a little bit, that teams may not want to bring a player like Cam Newton in, a former MVP, superstar player who may very quickly show that he's the best quarterback on the team in lots of different locker rooms when you've got an established starter in place. And they made their decisions back in February, March, April during the free agency season when they couldn't really tell whether or not Newton was close to recovered from last year's Liz Frank issue and then the January, or I think it was the end of November, early December surgery, whether or not he had been fully recovered yet. And maybe you don't want to bring him in with the expectation that he's going to be your starter and pay him any sort of contract at that point if you weren't sure. So I'm sure that COVID and the injury and the lack of being able to physically examine him played a role, but some of it may have been just locker room dynamics and otherwise. And, as to why it happened now, hard to say for certain. I don't know if this was his only option, or as we get closer and closer to July 28th and teams bringing players back onto campuses and into the team facilities, maybe this was the right time for this to finally happen. And you can't argue that the New England Patriots and their organization isn't a great spot if you're Cam Newton for lots of different reasons. Jarrett Stidham is still there for certain, and the Patriots have talked him up a lot. But Newton, if he is healthy, hard to believe that he's not a top 10 quarterback in this league, and obviously then the best option for the Patriots this year.
Gene, I know this Antonio Brown and mental illness is probably not your lane just any more than it's not anybody's lane here. But we've had some good discussion on the base camp board between guys like Drew Davenport, who's an attorney, and then you have Daniel Simpkins, who's talked about some things, and I've quoted them in a recent piece that we just discussed a little bit earlier. But what are your thoughts on the disciplinary action that might be taken with Antonio Brown? Do you think it's going to, if you were to make an estimation, do you think it would be on the higher side or the lower side for him this season? Based on that, we haven't really heard anything from him since he got cut by New England, or at least after the arrest, that it seems like, maybe that's a positive sign for him. I'd love to hear from you and Bloom in terms of what are your thoughts about the chances of Antonio Brown being a fantasy factor this year and for how many weeks?
Well, what was the speculation on the number of games in which he might be suspended? Was it sort of
2 to 4?
Just 2, really? I wasn't sure if it was more on the half season side of things. If it's 2 to 4, then I think he could definitely be a fantasy factor. In the same way that everybody has been limited as far as what they can do from a conditioning and chemistry standpoint, Antonio Brown, if he's got the ability to separate in the elite ways that he did before, can be a fantasy factor. Now, taking 2 to 4 weeks off this year may prove to be the end of your season too. Who knows what's going to happen with this coronavirus pandemic as the season wears on? And, in some respects, I don't think you can consider it a month-to-month situation anymore. I think recommendations in different areas of the country are going to take approaches on a week-to-week and maybe even day-to-day basis as the respiratory season actually gets here. So if he misses the first month of the season, who knows how many games he'll play after that. But if you're talking week in, week out, even the time he spent the game or two with the Patriots last year, he was a productive player in the midst of fighting through the behavioral health issues that he had been. So if the suspension is that short and he gets signed early enough, then yes, I think for sure he could be a rosterable player for sure, and probably work his way up to a top 20 option without too much difficulty.
Gene, tell me if I'm a crackpot. Well, I know I'm a crackpot. Tell me if this is specifically a crackpot take. The closer we get to training camp, and in full disclosure, guys, I'm starting the FFPC Pros versus Joe's Dynasty Superflex Best Ball Startup on Monday, and I'm going with a kind of crazy out of left field strategy where I don't have a second, third, and fourth round pick, but I have 2 picks in the 5th through the 10th rounds through trades that I've made because it's best ball, And I'm thinking, Gene, because it's dynasty, everyone's going to be rookie fever crazy. But I want to win this year. I want to take down the first prize. I want to get the $1,500 this year. I need it. The economy is not it's not good. I just feel like rookies are going to be even riskier this year because there was one of the writers for the Giants said like the rookies haven't even got their helmets yet. They haven't even been to the facility. They haven't met the coaches in person yet, and it just seems to me like getting used to NFL conditioning, coming up on that rookie wall, all those things that can be. Now, there are going to be some rookies who can rise above because their career trajectories we're going to see are going to take off. But I feel like it's the minefield for rookies is going to be even more fraught with difficulty this year. Am I inventing this in my head?
Whole season's going to be a minefield this year, right? I mean, you could tell yourself the same story about veterans who you might be concerned about conditioning and chemistry. This offseason has been like nothing else. I mean, even though we've seen a number of players get together and do workouts, it's not team workouts necessarily. Hopefully they're staying in condition, but I think we're going to have a number of veteran players that you would have expected to be able to trust that don't have the years that they would have expected. And football being the 11-on-11 sport that it is, even a player that's in great condition and who is ready to play is going to be affected by those around him, whether that's players that get ill or players that have early season injuries or conditioning concerns or any number of other things. So, for sure, rookies have an extra level of complexity in that they're moving on to a professional league against a caliber of talent that they've never played consistently against before. But I think we're going to see issues across the board at every position, at every age group, every week of the season. It's going to be, I think minefield is a reasonable way to put it. It's going to be a day-to-day, week-to-week, game-to-game situation. Whatever a team looks like in week 1 may not be what that team looks like in week 4, week 8, week 12. I mean, not trying to minimize it or be overly dramatic here, but good luck, making any sort of projections on what you think a team is going to look like in week 6 or 8 this year.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like this is like a strike season in the sense of where, I would have to think they may have to expand rosters at some point. Maybe maybe it won't go that far, but I would have to think based on what we've seen just out in the world right now that there's a very good possibility that we'll be looking at players who maybe played in the XFL or played in the Arena League or played in some and are getting a shot because some players may opt out. And what do you think about the possibility of players opting out? I mean, we've looked at the Major League Baseball and NBA as possibly models for what's going to happen. I mean, but what are your thoughts on the idea of opting out and how that may go?
I would imagine that professional sports players are going through the same calculus that the rest of us are going through in terms of, it's a $1 billion business. But they have family members at home they're concerned about. They're concerned about their kids. They're concerned about folks that are close to them. And what does it mean for me to go to work and potentially bring home an illness that, and again, percentages being what they are, most people we would expect in those younger age groups without risk factors to do just fine and not have any long-lasting effects, although we're relatively early in this pandemic. But I know each of us have had this conversation. I have it with so many other friends and family. What do you think I should do? Is it safe for me to be going out? What do I think about my loved ones? How do you feel about this? And, a lot of times you say, we know what we know. We're going to know more as time goes on, but they're having those same discussions. It's heightened for them because, it's all relative, of course, but somebody that's trying to make a decision to go to their job at the grocery store, go to their job at the restaurant, go to their job and any number of other things is having the same thoughts. I would like to be able to work. I need to be able to work. It's important for us to be able to work, but I'm concerned about what that may mean for myself and my family. And players are thinking those same things. And you had a couple of Major League Baseball players voice that opinion already and choose to opt out, a little bit in the NBA as well. And I can guarantee you the players are not either 100% all in or 100% all out. There's some fraction of doubt in both directions. And it would not take much for that to swing wildly in the other direction. Seeing a friend, a close friend, a family member of a close friend get sick, and have you observe the complications that we can see with COVID, even though they're rare, maybe enough for you to say, okay, this just isn't worth it to me anymore. And again, this isn't a month-to-month thing. It's going to be a day-to-day, week-to-week, meeting room to meeting room situation. And so it would not be surprising by any stretch to see players opt out in larger amounts as that slippery slope, so to speak, might happen. The opposite could happen. If the NBA is successful in its bubble environment in a state that's got an active epidemic in so many cities in Florida right now, if Major League Baseball can be successful over a 60-game season with all of the travel that they're going to do in the next couple of months, then maybe things move well. Maybe things look a lot better in the beginning of respiratory season than you might expect, and it goes in the other direction. And there's a building swell of optimism and success that happens, and we find out that maybe this isn't as difficult as what you might think physiologically and from every other aspect might happen. So I don't know that we're going to see a large number of players opt out initially. But I think you're going to hear about players testing positive, and I think there's going to be stress in locker rooms at different points in different teams over the season. And again, to try to project what folks may be thinking is difficult to do. But I can guarantee you that if 99% of the NFL players show up to training camp in July, a large percentage of those may not be fully ready to do what's necessary through the rest of the season. And if there are issues that come forth, then I would fully expect to see some measure of players opt out.
I have one follow-up, if you don't mind, Bloom. I just want to ask, because it just come to mind, and I forgot it's from your article, and that's can you kind of differentiate for the folks who are listening today about really kind of the difference between being an elite athlete and being maybe a constitutionally, having a good constitution as an athlete, maybe where some of the differences may lie. I mean, you can move well and have speed, and you can have a tremendous strength, but you still may be maybe heavier than you should be, and maybe have other risk factors that just because you're an elite athlete doesn't make you bulletproof.
Yeah, of course. And even if you have no easily identifiable risk factors, there's some component of this we believe that has to do with, for the lack of a better word that I'm going to use, I'm just going to use the dose of the virus that you're exposed to. A higher viral load, a higher level of exposure may put you at higher risk even if you're a little bit healthy. But yeah, absolutely. Scott Barrett and I were just talking about this throughout the day today. We know that there are a number of players that are going to have some pre-existing conditions. We may not know their names and we may not know their conditions, but players in the league are diabetic. Players in the league have issues with blood disorders. Players in the league undoubtedly have high blood pressure or other conditions that might be concerning. And for certain, as we've seen so many offensive linemen over the years leave the league, immediately lose 40 to 50 pounds, and you can't recognize them anymore, which means that wasn't their preferred body type. That wasn't their healthiest body type. It was weight they put on that may not have been the greatest weight in order to be successful, or what they thought to be successful. And yes, maybe an elite athlete in prime cardiovascular condition can withstand some of those changes, but there have been plenty of studies over the years that suggest some of these players have long-lasting effects from that weight gain and the pounding and everything else that they've taken over the course of a short or long NFL career. And carrying extra weight is a known risk factor for this. Elevated BMIs, body mass index, obesity puts you at a much higher risk of respiratory complications with COVID. That's been a fairly consistent theme through all of the studies and risk factors that we've seen. And yes, you have seen, I just think back to the video, Larry Allen sprinting down and catching up with a defensive back and tackling him on an interception return. These guys are superior athletes, but they're also under stress. And I went back and looked at, I've been going to a couple of the orthopedic conferences over the past few years to kind of get coached up a little bit on some of the orthopedic injuries. And sometimes they have a discussion about medical issues and otherwise, but there wasn't a lecture in the last 2 years about numbers of players with hypertension, high blood pressure, number of players with known other risk factors and that sort of stuff. But the number is not zero. There are going to be a number of players that are on medication for various and sundry risk factors that could be concerned. And again, I'm not trying to put a downer on where we are here, but even elite athletes are at risk of having complications with this, and you would expect the number to be extremely low and hopefully zero, but the risk is definitely not zero.
No, it's not. I mean, there's a lot of there's more that we don't know than what we know. But Gene, the question that's really been on my mind, I have to know what you think. What should we call the Washington football team now?
Anything other than what it's currently called?
Yeah, well, it's going to be a new. It's going to be a new team. They're going to. I mean, FedEx is saying they want it off. Nike's pulled all the stuff. So we have a chance now. Maybe we can crowdsource this, like all of football fans. What would you what comes clear your mind? The Washington.
No one wants that. No one wants my mind cleared, and the first thing to pop into me.
Matt, what would you say? The Washington.
What's that spy show that Gene likes so much? I forget. What's the animated spy show?
Archer?
The Washington Archers? Yeah, we could, but no.
That's a Cecil special.
That is
always forgets this guy, right? Well, not so good at where the camera is.
There it is.
Right there. We're doing all these video visits, and you would think that I'm staring right at the webcam, and I would know where to put my hand to put it in front of the webcam. But routinely, when I'm trying to use my hands to make a point with parents and patients at home, who knows where I'm pointing? It's ridiculous. You would think I know right there, and it's a foot in front of my face, and I can't point. I know it's over this. See, I don't know.
Well, you think I'd recognize you after hearing your voice, but I hear your voice. So I don't know what's going on.
This is the first time in 15 years that my face has seen the light of day. So
wow,
this was a little bit of a forced choice. You cannot
N95.
Successfully wear an N95 mask and have a complete seal with a beard. And so since we are about to be, in my particular clinic, finally able to evaluate patients with fever and respiratory symptoms in the office, it's a necessity now that we have finally been able to acquire enough protective equipment to do so. So you get to look at my face for podcasting in person now. No one recognized me. Everybody has been afraid to say anything about it other than Ben. Ben just told me to go back upstairs and put it back on.
Ben's my guy. There we go.
Yeah, I've gotten plenty of funny looks and chuckles like, yeah, I know. It's actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
So, no, man, it's good. I just didn't recognize. I hearing your voice coming out of your mouth. It's kind of jarring because I'm like,
I'm certain. Voice? Yes, I'm certain when my mother sees me for the first time, she may not recognize me either. But it is almost everybody that has known me in most of my worlds that circle around me right now, from my medical training to everybody I've worked with, you guys. I mean, as long as I've been with y'all, I've had something on my face in some form or another.
So did the other Dak Bramel? What was the expression on her face when she saw this?
She was a little bit shocked too. I think she knew it was coming for a while because we knew this was going to happen. It was just a matter of when the fit testing date came up, and it just so happened to be yesterday morning, actually. So they'll get used to it. She's seen my face like this for a while. We've known each other since we were in high school. So this particular mug isn't new to her, but she said the same thing. You look 10 years younger. And I don't know if that means I lost all my wisdom and superpowers when I shaved this thing off or not, but I think I've got enough gray hair on my head that I don't think anybody's going to come up and accuse me of being too young to be a doctor like they did back in the day. I don't think that's likely to happen, but
there you go.
All right. And by the way, Gene, since I'll weigh in, we do lose the Mon-Chi-Chi cuddliness. Everything is one length, the top, because it looks like now I could imagine if when the brow gets real pointed, thinking I don't want to tangle with that guy. You could pull off intense, potentially unhinged guy more.
You think? I don't know. I'm not sure I could ever pull that off.
I think if we use the headset a little bit more so that we could round off what's the air in between it, and then get some really black looking like glasses.
Mm.
We could paint him gray. He could look like the alien emoji with that with that thing going on. You know how they
My eyeballs a little bit bigger. Yeah.
exactly. We can get a little bit of that going on.
I'll get us back on track, Gene. Because I want to say this, because again, I'm watching.
I have
drafts.
no one to blame but myself for these last 3 weeks for taking us off track. By the way, it has clearly been me that has sent the show off the rails. So
that's okay, but I think
that's about time.
I can only imagine the weight sometimes that you have on your shoulders. So wherever you want to go, whatever. This can just be the Dr. Gene therapy show as far as
no one wants that either.
But
Bloom does.
I do. That's what I've been. Gene, it's been like I don't know when I started on the couch 8-9 years ago. I mean, I've been pursuing this. You're like the white whale. You know,
this might be the closest year you'll ever get.
What do they say? My DMs are open.
Wow. All right. This is wonderful. No, but really and truly, I do, as an aside, want to say, and I say this always in love when I talk to Dr. Gene, but there are a lot of people out there in the medical community that are really taking responsibility for the community right now and taking on the weight of a lot of our fates. And, I'm thankful for all of them. Okay. I'm watching a lot of drafts, Gene. I feel like I'm getting in tune with what people are thinking, just so I know if I want to go counter to it. AJ Green gets no respect. None. People are acting like he's broken and he's never going to be AJ Green again. Just based on what we've watched the last, I guess, was it 3 years? Are they right? Is that the rational response to this? Or are people forgetting that he's AJ Green, even if his body seems to be letting him down more frequently?
Yeah, both. I think it's an entirely reasonable take to have concerns about a player you haven't seen finish a season in some time, and then be told that the player may have been back between weeks 2 and 4 last year and then never returned to play, knowing that he's above 30, and that's not necessarily a death sentence for wide receivers. Hopefully, Joe Burrow is a better option than Andy Dalton as far as getting the ball downfield and where he needs to be. That offense overall seems to be better from offensive line to skill position players. So I think you can easily tell yourself a story in which if AJ Green is healthy and he's allowed his body to fully heal and comes back in conditions such that we don't see a soft tissue injury early, there's no reason he can't be successful this year. But I mean, how many times have folks drafted AJ Green in the last 2 or 3 years and then been bitten? So it's an entirely reasonable thought to think that you're not willing to take him where his upside may project him to be. But I'm hoping that we see him back in some sort of healthy capacity. And if that's the case, if in the first couple of weeks, if he seems healthy and Joe Burrow looks like he has any clue what he's doing, I think you'll see the tide turn on AJ pretty quickly.
Nice.
Go ahead. Do anything else for him, Matt?
No, you go ahead.
No, Gene, do you want to hang out with us for the next half hour? Is the squirrel signal on a cloud? Do we need to?
No, I'm good.
Disc golf caddy.
I'll just do my best to behave myself over here in the corner.
That's good. No, we'll bring you in. As these different things come up. Okay, Matt. Now I get to ask you. What's the name? What's the new name of the Washington football team?
Man, I have no idea. I mean, I don't have anything original for it, and anything I
the
would
antibodies.
Yeah, right. There you go.
The Washington immunity. That actually has like
the Washington swamp creatures. I don't know. I mean,
it is a swamp. I mean, that area was a swamp.
It was
the design of the roads and all that conspiracy theory and all that stuff.
I mean, all I can think of are nice things like blossoms and monuments and things like that. So,
yeah, of course,
blossoms.
Yeah, in the spring, right? The cherry blossoms.
Yes.
Matt, Cam Newton. Is this a great gotcha moment for Bill Belichick for Cam Newton? And we're gonna watch him be Cam Newton and think, yeah, this was a massive omission, oversight, maybe intentional by the rest of the league, and they've let Bill Belichick have a back door into keeping the team relevant, keeping the team contending, or was the rest of the league rational in letting him be on the free agent block for that long and sign for couch cushion change?
It's a combination of both, I think, and the reason being is that for a lot of other teams, they may be developing a younger quarterback that they feel comfortable with, and they feel like that the only other option if they added Cam Newton was to take that player off the field, which to them might not make sense, install that player's development, or they're terminating the player's opportunity to develop too early, and they're still invested in him, or they're going to put Cam Newton on the bench and basically use him as a backup, which doesn't make a lot of sense either. So when you look at the Patriots, I think it's a very good fit because New England can run a lot more, veer type of offensive looks where Newton's going to be able to run the football. They're going to be able to, focus on that run game a good bit, short passing, occasional play action, deep balls. But it's a team that doesn't have a lot at wide receiver. I mean, I feel like I talk about this monthly on the show, but they, if your slot receivers are like side dishes at a restaurant, then everything they have are, their wide receiver depth chart is basically plates of French fries. I mean, they don't have anything really different in terms of outside threats. So for Jarrett Stidham, first year starter to come in without a really complete receiving core that can help him out, and rookie tight ends that most likely to be the starters in this situation, it just seems like it would be a really bad deal for Stidham and his development. So it's okay to say they really like him, but they can really like him and know that he's unproven, and this is not a good scenario for him as a first-year starter, whereas they can stall that a little bit, and they can use Cam Newton, let him run the ball a little bit more. Remember, Josh McDaniels did a pretty good job with Tim Tebow back in the day. So why not? Well, was it McDaniels, or was that actually the former John Fox? It was actually John Fox.
Mike McCoy.
Mike McCoy. But, I think that they will make adjustments still with Cam Newton in the sense that they'll be able to run the ball a little bit more often. That can open up things for their running backs because of defenses having to account for Cam Newton's legs. They'll do more read option, spread looks, maybe a little bit more veer, like I said, triple option type of stuff where, this run game becomes a little bit more viable. They don't have to lean on their receivers as much. And that Cam Newton has the experience in terms of being a field general that, without great receivers, if any of those players don't really emerge beyond Edelman, that he can make do and he can still make plays and keep them close. So I like the fit. I just don't think it's a great fantasy, thing. And it's not because of Cam, it's just because of the surrounding talent. So I think Cam is a, 500-yard rusher. I think he's someone who can probably get you somewhere between 3,500 to 3,700 yards. But to me, that's like bottom end of the top 15, maybe top 20, as opposed to being, a quarterback one in one quarterback start leagues.
Yeah, for fantasy, it might not be as exciting. I mean, I don't think he's going to get into that top 6 tier, but he might be good enough to start, or at least picking your matchups. I do think the Patriots are going to want to win low-scoring games. I find it telling, by the way, that Cam Newton's one of the players that Bill Belichick has just gushed about in the past. I mean, he called him public enemy number 1.
They ran on him. I mean, and
Belichick sees how he makes the game. Well, it's what Belichick wants to do, right? He makes the game like asymmetrical. It's what Mahomes does, right? Yeah. Where it's non-linear, it's asymmetrical. And for Belichick, he understands, like, now I can't dictate the terms to you anymore. You're dictating the terms to me, and that's difficult.
And you know who he's following? He's following the team that whooped their tail,
right?
Which is the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, they're looking at the Ravens and they're going, Lamar Jackson whooped our tail, and they have the defense. We have the defense. We just need a quarterback who can kind of match that. So whereas Lamar Jackson's the scat back version of this particular, offense where you can have him run like a scat back as well as throw well, Cam Newton's kind of more like your big power back or your fullback who can do the same thing, but they're probably not going to have Newton, run over people too. Because when you watch a lot of the tape, and I'm probably going to have Taylor Kyles on, who works at Pat's Pulpit, And we're going to do an RSP film room on Cam Newton probably within the next week or two, just to profile some of the offensive things that they're going to do. And a lot of that is you watch Cam Newton against the Patriots, and he's getting 10, 15-yard gains and sliding to the ground, not even getting touched. You don't think Bill Belichick's going to want to do that? They're going to create ways to do that very easily.
My feeling is having Cam as the quarterback, because you brought up the Ravens, having Cam as the quarterback, running the Cam offense, and the defense just getting to practice against that more often is going to make them more prepared when they have to face the Ravens, because they need that brain mapping. Gene, what was your reaction this is the first story in a while that there was maybe some happy adrenaline, some looking forward to a story unfolding adrenaline from football fans. It also, by the way, came out 16 minutes after they announced that the Patriots got a third-round pick and lost, and a $1.1 million fine for something they did with the Bengals. The NFL didn't say anything specifically about what they did that was punishable or make any statement about it. And then, so a classic
will there be a civil
kind of move. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, Gene, what was your reaction? What went through your head when you saw Cam Newton, Patriot, speculated for months, now reality?
I think it's awesome. I think putting Cam Newton and Bill Belichick together is great. I think putting Cam Newton in Boston is going to be good as well, hopefully. But mostly, fun, talented players anywhere in the league, good stories anywhere in the league. As you said, any positivity we can get right now is great. I'm just looking forward to, you ask me these questions and I'm a lot more optimistic than some of the others. I'm hoping that we get to see football this year. I hope nobody is hearing me saying that,
No.
While I'm skeptical about it, I'm still hopeful that it happens, because if it does happen, that means that good things are happening, I would assume.
Well, and maybe, Gene, since we're going, into the heavier territory, but these two things are not unrelated. I want to say, what was it we were talking about in base camp, right? Like the Arkansas governor, has the football and says, if you want this, you need to put this on, so the idea is that if people want football, and we can message to that and say, we still have 2 months before the beginning of the season, 2 months plus. If we all get it together, we can have these things. So it's not just necessarily about hoping or praying, but we're all doing that too. It's that maybe that can be something that cuts through. Isn't it football the great unifier, right?
Maybe. Let's get as many different types of carrots hanging in front of many different demographics of folks as we can, and see if we can get this ship turned around the right direction.
We need to make them ice cream cones, because nobody in this country eats carrots.
Well, that's true.
So we have you get your ice cream cone after you eat your carrots.
Pizza, a slice of pizza.
I've already had my ice cream tonight, so.
Oh, see, there you go.
Would you say, Bloom, you'd eat pizza every night if you could?
Yes.
You'd subsist on different types of
pizza. I've got my buddy Uriah Zane Hunt via 313 Pizza out there. But yes, I could probably eat pizza every night. At least I feel like I could. I see now I feel like myself pulled back into the more serious elements of what's been going on. But let me get us back to, I guess, some sort of football reality. Matt, what do you think of how Dallas has been handling this Dak Prescott situation? Because there's this time value of money thing, right? Like Shaq Barrett said, I wanted a long-term deal. He's got a franchise tag, but he understands the way the world, I think is what he said now, that he might not get a long-term deal. Look, the NFL salary cap might be flat for a few years, or maybe even drop, depending on what happens. Chris Jones said, Le'Veon told me about this. I don't know if you saw that. Le'Veon told me about this. He's not going to play unless he gets a new deal. Yannick Ngakoue wants a new deal on a new team. What about Dak Prescott? Because he's not speaking out, but the Cowboys don't seem to be treating him like someone that is the franchise. Like, he's not getting the same respect that Jared Goff got from the Rams.
Yeah, and that probably tells you a little bit about each organization, which just tells you that maybe the Rams jumped the gun a little bit, and the Cowboys are a little bit more circumspect than they should be. I mean, those two players are going to be tied together for a little while, probably for the rest of their career because they came out in the same class. But I mean, Prescott receives a lot of negative publicity whenever he has a bad moment. Like it's not. He's one of those players that I just think that gets a fair amount of criticism because he's not the classic Drew Brees, Tom Brady type of quarterback. He's a guy that isn't as technically pretty as some of those passers, but he gets the job done often enough. But he does it in a variety of ways, both as a thrower and as someone who can run. But it's like he's a good passer. He's just not a great anticipatory passer. And because he's not like Russell Wilson in the sense that Wilson is off the charts good in certain statistical categories, whereas Prescott's been great with the deep ball, but maybe you're not seeing some of the same level of special plays or the fact that they haven't really won. And I really think the issue is that they haven't won in the playoffs, like on a consistent basis. Right. If they got deeper into the playoffs with Dak Prescott, I don't think this would be as big of a deal. But the Cowboys have such a long-standing historic winning culture that that this team is kind of one of those that if for the Rams, they make it to the playoffs, let's get this guy and he gets into a Super Bowl, let's get him a franchise caliber contract, or we renew his contract. Whereas with the Cowboys, it's kind of like you need to win a couple of Super Bowls to meet the standard of what the Cowboys look. I mean, the Cowboys think of Tony Romo as a disappointment a lot of times, when you think about him as a quarterback, and he was a darn good quarterback. So I just think it's the environment more than anything else. And he's a good player. And if he winds up somewhere else, I mean, he will probably help that team out a great deal, especially if they cut him loose within the next year or two. And I think that he could wind up being a very good starter elsewhere.
Yeah, well, Aaron Rodgers, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, there's some non-zero chance. Well, with Rodgers, it's almost 100% that he will be on a new team in 2 or 3 years. But, some pretty big names following Cam Newton. Going back to this, Gene, if I ask you to clear your head and just visualize the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones, and Mike McCarthy. So much has happened this offseason. And his dream team of assistant coaches, Mike Nolan, as he gets to wear the suit as the defensive coordinator and so on. What feeling are you overcome when you think of Jerry and Mike and the Cowboys?
Yeah, it's certainly set up for success if you trust Mike McCarthy to be able to put that offense together.
He's got analytics guys now. Did you hear?
Well, sure. I mean, all that's got to translate to the field, though. I mean, you have to use the analytics that are given to you, and you have to make good decisions with the data you have, right? You got Dak, Elliott, 3 very strong wide receivers, arguably still a very strong offensive line, although one that's beset by chronic injury over time. That offense is, when you look at it on paper, I don't want to say that it's Chiefs-like necessarily because it doesn't necessarily have that elite upside. Yeah. Exactly. And, there's no field stretcher on that team quite like Tyreek Hill. But they've got probably Dallas does, a slightly better offensive line. It's hard to argue with Ezekiel Elliott over the group of backs that Kansas City has. So that's a team that's going to put up some points. And they've got pass rushers there. There's some work to be done in the back 7, but that is an awfully formidable football team if it can stay healthy.
But Mike McCarthy, sorry, Matt, I'll let you take. When you think back to the Aaron Rodgers, how many Super Bowls should the Packers have won with Aaron Rodgers? Or more? How much was Mike McCarthy helping Aaron Rodgers or holding back Aaron Rodgers?
I don't know. I think at some point there's going to be a 30 for 30 that defines exactly what was going on with Aaron Rodgers and whether or not he was a player that was elevating the huddle and elevating that locker room or holding certain things back. And Mike McCarthy could go a long way to cementing his reputation as a better coach than he appeared in Green Bay if things go better in Dallas. I don't know about that. There were points where I thought Aaron Rodgers was a stud Hall of Fame talent and all they needed to do was put players around him, and why aren't they drafting wide receivers, and that same narrative that's gone on from year after year after year. And then there were times you thought, well, I don't know. I mean, there's enough here. What's going on? So I don't know. I'm not super down on Mike McCarthy. There are definitely a few things that you can point to, from time management skills to game management skills, that you would question. But he's going to get another chance with yet another very, very strong offense to see what happens. What do you guys think?
Yeah, what were you going to say? I'm
No,
sorry.
I just had an epiphany, and I'm sure half the people in the chat room are already thinking, well, the Hogs are like the Washington offensive line, so why not just call them the Hogs or the Warthogs or the Boars or something that just converts that right over there? If you don't want to go for the, I was going to joke you could call them the Marshalls so they could one up the Cowboys, but then that invokes George Preston Marshall, which is what they're probably trying to get away from. So, maybe the Bulls. I don't know, but I think the Hogs has got to be it.
See, it's funny because when you said Marshalls, this is totally Freudian. I heard Martians, like warlike, the death from above, the Washington death from above. Now I feel like I'm doing the couch. I'm going to go off the rails.
Independence Day. There we go.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't know. Look, I'll just put a bow on this topic and just say that I think that the way they've handled the Dak Prescott situation, Matt, you summed it up. You said a lot by saying little when you said it. Just speaks to the organization. It just speaks to how they do things. And like you said, maybe if we get to see Dak Prescott elsewhere, that's another one. That's what's fun about players and coaches changing teams, is it recontextualizes what we've seen in the past. Like, we're still learning about the past by what we observe in the present, and we hope that we will have a future to look forward to.
So here's one for you.
Yeah,
James Conner. Like 2 years ago, I mean, like, I have James Conner as like a top 5, top 10 back on my rankings. And the guy's like rebuilt his body now that he's actually had an off season. Like the Pat McAfee show, the joke was that he's going to have to run sideways to get into the hole based on how ripped he looks. But he's in great shape. And 2 years ago, he was an excellent back, in terms of fantasy football. And again, people are like, barely touching him based on what he could do. They're looking at last year and thinking, like they seem to forget that Ben Roethlisberger's back, the offensive line's intact, and they said he's going to be the feature back. So why do you think people are down on him?
With injuries. I mean, it's what Gene was saying about AJ Green, although I think it's more defensible for Conner because he's younger. And by the way, speaking of coronavirus complications, potential cancer survivor, but I don't love the way that Conner has reshaped his body yet again this offseason. He looks maybe less flexible, more hulking,
Doesn't sound like Mike Tomlin really wants to buy into him either.
Well, Anthony McFarland, right? Benny Snell, Anthony McFarland. It's writings on the wall. They're not going to sign James Conner to another contract. And they're not going to sign Juju Smith-Schuster to another contract. It'd be surprising. And the cap situation they're in, especially if the cap stays flat or goes down, that's not good too. But you're right, Gene. But from a fantasy perspective, he will get a chance to reassert himself at the beginning of the year. And like Matt said, it might just be as simple as, well, Roethlisberger's back, the running lanes open up again, the scoring's there, and getting James Conner in the 3rd or 4th round can be a key to winning your league. This is one of those players I'm really on the fence about in that upcoming Dynasty best ball draft, because he's falling to the 6th or 7th round. But he also, you could have like Jordan Howard on your hands next year, basically.
Well, I'll add a counter to you about your stiff thing about what he did was all body weight exercise. So if you're doing body weight exercise to get that kind of frame, he's probably not going to be stiff, because that's usually about, most body weight exercises really are about maximizing flexibility. So he may look like a guy who you're afraid is going to be that way, but if he got ripped that way doing strictly body weight, which is what he says, that may be an argument that'll be worth contesting a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm open to it. I may talk myself into taking him in this draft, because that's why I'm trying to do, is by doubling up in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th rounds, I can have one pick where I just wildly throw the dart. I can miss the board or hit the bullseye, and then another pick that I'm making sure to lay some foundation for my scoring. And James Conner is one of those guys. Running backs, it's always dicey in dynasty leagues.
Well, take Christine Michael at the end of your draft, because I know you love him. And
Naeem Hines is my new Christine Michael. Naeem Hines is that's another guy getting no respect.
It may come to this.
So we're on the Steelers now, Gene. Did you see Ben Roethlisberger's confession, that he took the mask off and said, what, he was addicted to alcohol, he was addicted to pornography, he's a new man now. Did you see his he practically said, Gene, will you take me back into your warm embrace?
Sure.
But did you see it?
Yeah, I did see it.
Does it change your opinion of him at all?
Yeah, what did we talk about a couple of weeks ago? We have to be open-minded. We have to be willing to give folks a second chance. If some of the things that haunted him and kept him from being his best self, you really trying to put me on the couch here? Sure, Ben, good for you. Rock on.
No, it's good. No, but see, what's good is what I like, Gene,
Matt is loving this.
One of the things we have a lot of fun with. We have a lot of fun with the behind the scenes, though, because I know if I ask you a lot about like a team, that your emotions are tied to, and just there isn't. But at least I see your emotions come out about Ben Roethlisberger, and then so it's good. I mean, I would say the same thing about Aaron Rodgers. Just that there's this unlikable aura to me, like the way that I perceive him, and it just creates always a storyline. I mean, that was the thing. Like growing up as a kid in the '80s watching football, it was almost more about the quarterbacks. And I know Matt knows what I'm talking about. It's more about the quarterbacks you rooted against than the team you rooted for. And in some ways, you were the foil. You were Charlie Brown because you knew Marino was going to do it. You knew Elway was going to do it. Like you just knew they were going to do it. But you went down kicking and screaming every time we played our roles. But yeah, it's fun to that relationship we have to players, especially quarterbacks and personalities. And you brought up, and it'll be interesting to see, Gene, how Boston and Cam Newton get along. But I do think there's a massive misperception about Cam Newton, the actual individual that he is, and hopefully it will be a fun journey. It will be fun to see, Matt. But you know what I'm talking about, right? Like that there are certain when you're watching football on Sunday, there were certain quarterbacks that you would watch to root with all of your heart against them not getting to the mountaintop, even though you knew they would. That's why you wanted it to not happen.
He wanted to bury a Danish in the back of John Elway's head at Starbucks. I saw it.
Exactly.
Yep, absolutely. Without a doubt. I admit it. I told Cecil, I said, will you bail me out if I sack John Elway? So he didn't. He just laughed. So I took that as a no. What's
your gut feeling, Matt, on the whole Elway, Drew Lock, and now they surround him with the track team? Like, is this Elway's great fourth act? I don't know what act we're on right now. Or is this the last gasp? And at some point, we're going to see the Broncos hit the reboot button in the next few years.
I see this more as the flotation device that gets him to shore safely. I don't think it's going to be, Drew Lock will probably have some Pro Bowl seasons at some point during his career, but it's kind of like that guy that you're not, it's like Tony Romo, but maybe could be in that range of Tony Romo where you go, this is a really good quarterback, but he's not going to be considered great, and I think that's kind of the possibility that he has in terms of upside. It just depends again on how much maturity he has to not try to be John Elway, because at Missouri, he had times where he tried to be, right, that Patrick Mahomes, John Elway, sling it around Matt Stafford thing. And it's, right now the jury, it just looks like he's not able to really do that successfully, consistently. There are isolated areas. So if he can keep it confined to those isolated areas, he's going to be a decent quarterback and maybe even have more upside if the offense, the surrounding talent really helps him out. If not, then I think you're going to see a guy who's going to have some ups and downs, but I think he's going to be good enough that unless there's, the ownership's like, we're tired of being 9-7, 10-6, 11-5, and we want to see you get to that next tier and have home field advantage. If they adopt a Cowboys mentality about their quarterback, then Locke will be the reason John Elway gets fired, or the final straw.
There's just a looseness. I think when you bring up Stafford, Jay Cutler is another good name to bring up when you watch Locke. There's a looseness to his game. Like, he doesn't seem like he's rigorous and regimented in how he's processing and reacting to what he's processing. And
he doesn't. Yeah, the joke is that the light switch hasn't come. I joked that there's a light switch and a thermostat in terms of regulating a player's game, and he's a light switch, not a thermostat.
Yes. It's hearing the music or being in tune, getting what's the phrase I've come up with? Like getting actionable information from what you see. All right, just a couple of minutes left, Gene. So I'll get this one in there. All right, because this is I can't help it that it is like it's like I'm on the couch.
Keep it up. See how long I stay the second half an hour. Keep it up.
All right. Really, but these are just the questions that my brain is telling me to ask you right now.
I'm just messing with you.
To get us to a season, week 1, who would be the ideal person to lead the NFL right now? Like if you could appoint someone to be in charge of all the policy and all of the actions to get us to week 1 successfully, is there a face? Is there a name that's popping into your head that you think could guide us there?
Marshawn Lynch.
My president. You got to be watching. Go back and watch on YouTube, everybody.
All right.
The first name that popped into my mind was Adam Silver, and I don't think that we want him necessarily running the NFL, but we're going to see what happens with the NBA. So if Adam Silver can successfully navigate these next, however long it is, 2 to 3 months till the NBA season is over, then I think a lot of those lessons can be translated at least into the early fall and will be successful. But I think it's going to take more than one person to navigate. You need an honest, charismatic leader to carry the day on here, but behind that person needs to be some number of folks that can educate and support and do a lot of the heavy lifting behind the scenes, so that the person who is the front-facing voice of what your choices and decision-making is can carry the, call it public relations, call it whatever you want, but can be the front-facing side of that.
And hopefully we can all pull together, rise up now. Okay, everybody, we had the first round. I just don't want this to be something where every single locality has to go through the horrors of this to finally get it. We had round 1, now we're on round 2. I hope there isn't a round 3, and I hope we can all be leaders within our communities, if it's within your family even, or your neighborhood. And as I've been saying, Gene, at the end of the couch, just wearing a mask, doing these things, taking it seriously can sometimes there's a name for some sort of effect out there like this. Like it's like creates social pressure. Like if enough people do it, then it creates a kind of domino effect. And hopefully that can help, and just more direct messaging. But we're carrying on, and there's a lot of love here within this room and also within the chat room, but we're back at a moment. I feel like you can feel it in the mass consciousness that, we're in a precarious moment right now. And I do hope we can pull together. And I know that we do this on this show. And I know that people listening to the show and people that are here tonight are also people that have clarity or otherwise, judgment, to be able to understand hopefully how to get through this. So I know that we wind up on a somber note, but at the same time, that this is the reality that is around us. And I just hope everybody is careful out there. I think in a lot of places right now, coronavirus is back out there like it was in early March. We don't quite know to what extent, and we kind of have to proceed as if it might be when you're living in cities, especially anywhere. So I hope everybody's being careful out there right now. And we'll keep coming back, It's July. Have a good holiday. We're going to be doing some fireworks on the street corner. Gene, fireworks, is this part of your family culture growing up?
Not really. Sparklers, maybe. Not
Matt?
too much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But probably like you, to the dangerous end with all the delinquents we all hung out with.
Oh, I remember delinquents. It was like my stepdad. I remember driving to a high school behind the baseball field in high school and letting off the stuff that's like a quarter stick of dynamite.
Yeah, M80s. I mean, yes. my apartment complex had M80s littered on hills all over the place, and that didn't have to be 4th of July.
No.
So I knew what an M80 was by the time I was about 5 years old, because we just had the little things all over the hills in the apartment I grew up in.
Absolutely. We got we got the giant sparklers. We got the sparklers that are like 3 feet long. So
that works.
That's going to be fun. So everybody have a good celebration of. There's still a lot of great things about this culture and about America that could only been created here, and there's still a lot of things to celebrate about. We're Americans through and through, at least the three of us here, and a lot of people listening and in the chat room. So we love you. Stick around with us, and everybody stay safe. Again, mask, wash hands, all social distance, all that stuff.